This is Peter.
And this is Tom.
And you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcast. All right, this is Peter Zablocki and Thomas Resko, and welcome back to our podcast. What do we got today, Tom?
Today, we're going to be looking at one of those figures in history that there's a lot of myths about, but there's also sometimes the truth is a lot weirder and more fascinating than the fiction, the myths, and that's a man by the name of Rasputin.
Indeed. I think we need to start off, first of all, since this is a child-friendly podcast, we kind of want to, I guess, give it a little warning that this this podcast will have some mature topics, especially of the sexual nature. And there was really no way of avoiding it if you're talking about Rasputin. I think that, if you do discuss, and I feel like a lot of the things we're going to talk about today will pretty much debunk some of those...
A lot of those myths, yeah.
Myths about Rasputin. But I think it's inevitable that we are going to talk about sex today. So, for those of our parents that are listening with their children...
Physical relations. We can say physical relations.
Yeah. For those parents that are listening with their kids to this podcast, we just wanted to let you guys know that... as much as we're going to try to do this in a tasteful manner, it is impossible to avoid when talking about Rasputin. Also, this particular episode was actually pitched to us by one of our listeners. So there you go. We listen. And I feel like a lot of people have done Rasputin. So I think when, and for those of you guys that already know this, because I feel like we said this many times, but Tom and I do not talk about this. The first time we're having this conversation about Rasputin is right now, as we're recording this. We all do our own research, and we kind of come together, and this is the first time we talk about it. So you guys are here for that. But, I feel like Rasputin's been covered on probably a lot of podcasts, but never by us. So this is our version.
This is our version of this of Rasputin, basically, because he's one of these mythological figures, basically, right? He's shrouded in this mythology. He's almost a larger-than-life figure, particularly in Russian history.
Absolutely.
He was considered a sexual deviant, right? A mystic healer, political saboteur, right? A renegade monk. He was just mysterious, and he was revealed and hated all throughout Russia during his lifetime. He became like a scapegoat for a lot of dissenting groups during his time period, and he's been has a very controversial death, and he's been dead for over 100 years. And he's still talked about.
Yes, absolutely. And the death part, I was going to touch upon that, but
that's what we're going to have to look at. Yeah, look at that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, Rasputin was born as a peasant in a small village, Pokrovskoye, I think it is. It's a small village that is in Siberia. So think of the vast size of Siberia, and as much as today, a lot of people consider Siberia to be very backwards, and the people of Siberia to be, kind of viewed as disattached from the rest of the civilization. Imagine what this was like, in 1800s. I mean, when he's born in 1869, Siberia really does seem like the edge of the world. Like, this is the end. His daughter actually believed later on that when he was born, supposedly the night he was born, there's like a comet or something that fell from the sky, and it it foretold that some great person was born. But obviously, this is his daughter who eventually, when she gave the history or the account of her father, Rasputin, she got his birthday wrong by like years. So we probably should not necessarily believe.
Remember, his name was not Rasputin at birth.
Nope.
It was. You're gonna have to pronounce it because you have that bit more of that background than I do.
Well, it was Grigory. That's his first name.
Grigory.
Yafimovich?
Yeah, Yafimovich Novaka.
Yes. Yeah,
and he actually gets the name Rasputin, the surname Rasputin, which is Russian for debauched one. Really because of his reputations. He was totally illiterate. He always remained illiterate, even though when he had all this power later in life, when he becomes buddy with the Tsar. Which we'll get to. But he was very lewd, and his hygiene was not the best, and that's really how he got that nickname of Rasputin.
Oh, they said that even when he was in like the Tsar's court later on.
Oh, he was
greasy, smelly, and just all right.
He used to have rotting food left in his beard for like months.
Yep. So let's talk about his youth. There's really not much known about his youth. Historians will tell you flat out that there's not enough reliable sources to really describe his youth.
We know he became we know he went a religious conversion at 18. right, and went to a
Yes.
monastery.
But
That's
prior
really
to that, we don't know
that's really what
much.
they know. They, much before that, they don't really know much about his childhood, about his parents and stuff. No,
Nope.
other than he was a poor peasant, basically, in
Yep.
Siberia.
And the rumors also did start that around this time he kind of becomes very sleazy. He's known as like the things he would do and how he would try to call on women and well, obviously girls and women. I mean, he's like a teenager today would probably be considered like sexual harassment.
Yes,
But
not probably. It would be. It would
it
be.
would be 100%. Actually, you're right. It would be considered sexual harassment. But at the time, and unfortunately for the women of Soviet, well, not Soviet, of Russian, sorry, not Soviet yet,
Not yet. Not yet.
of Russia, this was the reality. And therefore, he was very much viewed as this like sleazy kid in town. So, what really kind of brings him to this conversion, supposedly, is the fact that him and two other boys are accused of stealing horses.
I've heard about that in my other. I didn't find that in the
This one?
reading
Yeah.
research, but I never did hearing about that in the past about Rasputin. Yeah, that's
So,
something to do with horses. Yeah.
yeah, so apparently, like, him and two other boys stole these horses. And the two boys are found guilty of this theft and they are thrown out of Pokrovskoye. Like they basically banished them from the town. However, Rasputin fought for himself, kind of defended himself, and said, "The evidence against me is really not that great, and quite frankly, I don't think that I, in any way, shape, or form, am responsible for this theft. So instead of banishing me, I am willing to basically go on this long pilgrimage to this, holy monastery, which was like 300 miles away. He was going to walk there through Siberia. And basically, the townsfolk decided, like, well, that's not a bad idea because we kind of think that he's a troublemaker. So let's let him do this. Let him walk this pilgrimage. And that's basically when he kind of discovers this, he kind of is inspired, right? To become this great,
Well, yeah. Wait,
what's the word I'm
great.
looking
Well,
for?
this holy man. Well, basically, what he
Holy
does
man, I
is
guess.
he does. He was introduced to the flagellant
Yes.
sect, and he kind of perverted their ways. He kind of changed their doctrine, and he said that the way that you're closest to God is when you feel something he called holy passionlessness,
Yep.
and that the best way to reach that was through physical relations.
Yep.
After prolonged debauchery. That's basically what they said. So he never became a monk because of those beliefs, even though he went to that place. The Flagellants was a place where you would go and eventually train to become a monk. And
Yep.
he winds up actually marrying a woman at the age of 19 and has 4 children with him, but it didn't settle him down at all. And he abandons them pretty much. He leaves home, kind of again talking about how the mother, how
Hmm.
his daughter didn't really, couldn't even name his birthday really. And he wanders to Greece. He goes to Greece, he goes to Jerusalem, and he's doing all this, living off peasants' donations. And this is when he starts to gain a reputation as being a self proclaimed holy man. And people start to believe, not a lot of people, but he's getting sort of a following as far as people believe he has the ability to heal the sick and predict the future. And then he eventually brings him back in 1903 to St. Petersburg.
Yep. Um, One other thing here during this religious conversion, and this kind of comes up a lot later, there is a belief that, and this is kind of on his way to St. Petersburg before he makes it there, that he does join this underground spiritual Christian sect known as the
Hmm.
Klists. And
Yes.
this is kind of what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And Klists split from the Russian Orthodox Church and existed from like 1600 until late 20th century. And this is where it gets kind of like a little, I guess is the understatement. Um, uh, Nuts. This is where it gets. If you think this is nuts, because it probably is a little nuts. So they had these meetings. This Christian Orthodox sect had these meetings that were very subject to like suspicion and even hostility by other people that denounced them. But the idea was that they would basically sing these strange songs, and then afterwards they would really whip each other, like to so they would make
Yeah.
themselves bleed and whip one another, and that would be followed by them basically getting all naked and having these sexual orgies. And later on, it was disputed that was he not part of this sect. However, um, when he came back to his town for a brief period of time before going to St. Petersburg, he actually was still living in his father's household, and he started holding these secret prayer meetings there. And the meetings themselves were always kind of subject to suspicion and hostility from the village and the village priests particularly, because first of all, there's a rumor going around town that he always had female followers that would like wash him before each meeting. And then the group would go down and like shut the doors and shut the windows, and they would sing these strange songs. And then that ultimately what they were doing was having these sexual orgies. But again,
It's kind of been disputed a lot, and
exactly.
they think a lot of this, a lot of the rumors about Rasputin, like that he had an affair with the czar's wife
There's
and stuff like
daughters,
that.
Tsar, yeah,
Yeah,
Tsarina and the daughters.
yeah, yeah. That they don't think that really happened. They think a lot of that what happened was after the February Revolution in Russia in 1917, that a lot of his enemies kind of propagandized his life. They kind of made up these stories about him in order
To
to,
discredit him. Yeah,
yeah, they discredit him, to damage his reputation, and just kind of rewrite the history of him. Again,
yeah,
he had enemies, both political and religious enemies, and they were out to get him one way or the other. So they just, after his death, they make up a lot of these stories, sort of grandstanding what's going
yeah.
on.
So he lives his life around the turn of the century, 1900s, as basically a pilgrim, and he moves for months, years at a time, just kind of wanders the country and visits a variety of different holy sites. And during that time, that's also when his reputation, at least in um, in Russia, grows. I mean, his reputation he kind of precedes him. That there's this pilgrim, this monk that is kind of moving around and going from area to area with his studies and teachings. And as you mentioned before, that's what basically brings him to St. Petersburg. And St. Petersburg at the time it's kind of very interesting because there's a lot of really wealthy people, which is kind of why you eventually have the Russian Revolution. A lot of peasants are really upset by this, um, but these wealthy people are having this. There's like this movement, I guess. You might say they're part of a movement of spiritualism. It becomes extremely popular with the aristocracy. And when he arrives, he kind of feeds off of that idea that these people are into spiritualism and the supernatural almost. And because he's such an odd man, and his reputation kind of preceded him already as like this weird monk, he starts to be invited to a lot of these parties that are thrown by the
Aristocrat
elite.
parties, yeah,
Yeah, by
the
the elite.
elites, the higher up in the Russian, they they're into this mysticism that
Yes.
Rasputin is part of. That he knows how to talk, he knows how to keep people engaged, he knows what he's talking about, or at least he gives the perception that he knows what he's talking about.
Yep.
And a lot of these aristocrats, they're into this whole idea of, remember, this is the early 20th century, early 1900s. So they kind of believe in a lot of this, yeah, these mystic arts and the unexplained, and ways to heal things and ways to get closer to God and spiritual and awakeness. And Rasputin really thrives on that, and he really enjoys the way that being part of this. Remember, he's a peasant kid from Siberia,
Yep.
right? So he's getting all this attention from these upper elites, and he enjoys it. And he's going to do what he has to do to stay there. Even though a
Yeah. We
lot of
should.
people like him, a lot of
Yeah.
people don't like him also, because he does have this reputation.
Well, his reputation is that he basically sleeps with every woman he could see. I mean, this guy, is insane with regards to that. So he meets the Tsar on November 1st, 1905, at a party. He's actually through these elites. Someone invites him to this party. And this gets very interesting because the only reason the Tsar really and the Tsarina really speak to him is the sheer fact that they kind of find out about his like odd or mystical healing powers. And this becomes very important specifically to the Tsar and the Tsarina for one particular reason, and that is,
That's because their son was was a hemophiliac. He couldn't
yeah,
stop bleeding, basically, and they're desperate to do anything to save him because he's the only male. So he's
only
the
Mary
heir to the
Aaron. Yep.
throne. He's what, Alexa, right? Was that his
Yep.
name?
Yeah, that was
And
Alexa. Yep.
he's the only male heir. So it's very important that he is healthy. But he's not. He was always very sick, and literally a paper cut, unfortunately, could kill this kid.
Yeah, and another thing they said with the hemophilia was bad is it wasn't even just the external bleeding. A lot of it was the internal bleeding that was an issue.
Yes, yes.
And
He could fall, and then
and just yeah, they wouldn't even know how bad it was. And at the time, they would not give him heroin. So heroin was a thing. But they refused to give it to him. Not heroin. What am I saying? At the time, they refused to give him morphine, which was becoming a thing. But they didn't want to give it to him because they didn't want him to be dependent on morphine. So this kid basically just suffered. But what was
a lot of
really
pain.
insane, yeah, at this time is that the only way they tried to heal him whenever he got hurt was by giving him aspirin,
which is
which
the worst
was
thing you could do. Yeah,
exactly. And at the time, it was like this miracle drug, like this thing's going to heal and help with his pain. But aspirin dilutes the blood. I mean,
it's a
it
blood
is,
thinner. Yeah,
yeah, it's literally the
it's the
worst.
last thing you want to give to someone whose blood
Exactly,
won't clot.
exactly. And they kept on doing that. So, needless to say, Rasputin is asked, um, to visit Alexei, right? And to act as his healer. Again, this is kind of something that's think of this as parents, you're willing to try anything.
You're going to do anything you can to try to help your kid, and they
Yeah,
hear that he has this sort of power, so they do take him in, right?
yeah,
And really, what happens is he's in this session with Rasputin, and the blood does clot. He does the
yeah,
bleeding does stop, but historians say, yeah, that's because Rasputin refused to let the boy take aspirin.
yep,
So he was like, no, you're not giving him aspirin. I'm doing something you give it to him later. Not because he knew what aspirin was and aspirin was a blood thinner or anything like that. He just, was doing his own thing, saying no, nothing else. But that was enough for the czar's wife, because she basically saw this and that's it.
oh,
She
she
was
was
basically,
convinced, she was
she was
convinced.
convinced that it had
His
to be
praying.
Rasputin.
Yep,
Yeah,
Rasputin was praying, and it totally did it. And meanwhile, we now know that it was probably, like you said, because
yeah.
he cut off all aspirin.
Alexandria was her name, right? Alexandria.
Yeah, the wife.
Yeah.
She was German born, by the way, which is like a big deal. That we could talk about that a little bit, but because they first, well, I guess we'll talk about it now. She was German born, and they said that first of all, the people in Russia didn't like her, but also the fact that she gave birth to the only heir who was so sickly, they kind of blamed her for it, which is also why through that, like she wanted to redeem herself in the eyes of the Russian people, and not just help her son, but also clear her a little bit. So, as we now know today, medically speaking, it was probably the fact that aspirin did it, but also he was a very calming presence. People said that when he got into his trance of praying, he really kind of calmed people down. And other historians believe that perhaps he also helped Alexei and his mother, Alexandra, due to the fact that he basically hypnotized them. He made
Yeah,
them
yeah.
like literally relax and through hypnosis, which is we all know that stress is like the biggest enemy of any sickness or anything health wise. I could, like we said in a few podcasts before, I mean, look at presidents when they start the first day of presidency and when they leave, what stress does to them, right?
Yeah.
But they
It's
believe that highly
gigantic.
likely that was also the issue here. He basically put them at ease. And there's the one thing that's kind of freaky here. I'm sure you remember this one. When he was back in Siberia, um, and Alexei develops a hemorrhage, right, in his thigh and groin because he's like going on this like horse ride or something. First of all, I don't get it. Your kids
Because
I
they're
feel silly.
making him, they want him to be the king, so he's got to do the
Yeah.
kingly things, the prince thing. He has to be riding a horse, he has to be seen in public. They really didn't want to portray that the kid was sick as he was all the time.
This kid basically develops severe pain, right? Fever. He appears close to death. This is 1912. So Alexandria asked to send a telegram to Rasputin, who's again in Siberia, so no phones, none of that good stuff. So they sent his telegram, and she basically said, "Please pray for Alexei." And Rasputin writes back very quickly, and he says, "God has seen your tears and heard your prayers. Do not grieve. The little one will not die." And this is the key part: do not allow the doctors to bother him much. And they said the next morning, Alexei's condition was unchanged, but the fact that Alexandria was super encouraged by this message, the bleeding basically stopped within 2 days and the fever went away. And people at the time, specifically close to Alexandra and as well as the Tsar, they believed that it was Rasputin that did this from far away through simple prayer.
Yeah,
But
through
again,
his magic.
now, yeah, it's magic. But now people believe, but highly likely, what this was is just a calming presence. The mom was so stressed out and crying and putting so much stress, with the father also on the kid that they said that highly likely that it was just a calming presence of even just a
The
common
Yeah,
message that
well,
kind of
the
calmed them
thought
all
that
down.
things are going to be okay, that you're
Yeah,
going to be okay, that just calmed him down enough and allowed, the body to just kind of heal itself, or right itself at some
yeah,
level. He was not going to get full recovery, obviously, but it
and
stopped the bleeding because he wasn't getting all worked up. The heart rate goes down, everything like
yeah,
that. So
exactly.
yeah,
And then like this is when the controversy starts because after that he is basically the royal family kind of believes in this Rasputin thing. Like this is a real thing.
Yeah,
And
even Nicholas, even the Tsar Nicholas, really believed in Rasputin after this point.
yep,
And a lot of people were coming to him and saying, "Listen, you can't trust Rasputin because what happens is Rasputin gets taken in by the royals a bit more. He comes into court and he's really reaching some of his height of his power at this point.
mhm,
But he's getting into a lot of his like bad habits again. He's preaching the physical contact with
yep,
about the purifying and healing effect. Right? He had a lot of mistresses, and these mistresses were wives of the aristocrats in the higher up Russian,
absolutely,
Russian hierarchy. So he was not making and he even ones that he didn't become
yeah,
physical with, he still hit on them all the time. And right in
yep,
front of their husbands. And
yep,
these are high ranking officials, and they complain to Tsar Nicholas. And Nicholas, they basically learn pretty fast they can't do that because Nicholas kicks you out, basically sends you in exile
yep,
if you say anything negative about Rasputin, because he believes that Rasputin was nothing more than a holy man, and that he was, if nothing else, like you said before, Pete, was calming his wife down, and that was helping Nicholas, that was helping his son.
yep,
So he was going to keep Rasputin around.
yep. At the time, Russia actually was very liberal with its press. The Tsar allowed free press, but because of that, we actually have so much
About him.
about him because he was hated by the people. People viewed him as,
Yeah,
essentially this guy that everything that's bad that's happening in Russia, and Russia's going through a transition now from an agricultural society to an industrial society, and at the time, people believed that the Tsar was so out of touch with the peasants and the working class of the Russian people. And when they see this Rasputin everywhere, in camera, there's pictures of this guy. They hear news of him all the time. They kind of see as like, why is Rasputin, this peasant, not helping us? Like he has to have the ear of the Tsar. Something's not right. And we
or
should also
yeah,
mention that when World War One starts, and the Tsar gets really involved in the war part, the Tsar's wife is seen often with Rasputin, and then people start to vilify that because
they start to say, yeah, well, that's going to spread rumors. Because
yeah,
remember, in 1911, he was kicked out of Russia. He was expelled by Nicholas because
yeah,
of all his misdeeds, like kind of a general scandal. So he actually expelled him because the prime minister sent him a report, and Nicholas like, I have to kick you out of Russia. That's it. I have to
yeah,
expel you. But Alexandra wanted him back so much. Within like 4 or 5 months, he was back. And
crazy,
Nicholas is like, fine. He just kind of ignores everything else because he knows the calming effect, like we said before. And then, yeah, during he reaches his the height of his power at the Russian court after 1915 and during World War One, when Nicholas takes personal command of the Russian forces
yeah,
on the front, leaving Alexandra in charge of Rasputin serves as her personal advisor. And you
yeah,
basically see him everywhere.
yeah. And then obviously there's rumors of the fact that historians still can't really figure out if it's true or not that he obviously had an affair with the Tsarina, but also with
I don't know if
the
he would
teenage
though, because
daughters.
that's really, I mean,
A
you're
rumor.
really, I mean, you're really, if he gets caught doing that,
Oh, he's
then
beheaded.
he's done. Then he's done. Yeah. So I don't know. He kind of liked the life. Was he really willing to risk it? Who knows? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
But that's something that I don't know. Would it be worth the risk at that point?
yeah,
He's risking everything he knows, his lifestyle that he loves, all his power, everything. So
yeah. And again, same thing was applied to the teenage daughters, right?
yes,
Olga and
that was always a
Tatiana, they
rumor. Yeah.
believed that potentially he was sleeping with them as well. Now, there is actually I said American people, geez, great. The Russian people are definitely against this guy. Like first of all, they're against the Tsar, period. Like
Yeah, yeah,
Russians are
and
done.
he's yeah. There's other stuff going on. Another
Yeah,
podcast, different
yeah.
podcast.
So in 1914, actually, there's a assassination attempt on his life. A 33-year-old peasant woman attempts to assassinate Rasputin, and she stabbed him in his stomach, right outside
Stomach.
of his
Yeah,
home. But they said it wasn't like a little like jab. No, they said like the
it
guts
was
came
bad.
out. Like this was
Yeah,
like a mortal wound. Like he should not have lived.
but he made a full recovery.
Full recovery. And people, again, at the time, people are like, it's the mystic thing. This guy's like a charlatan. Something's not
Yeah.
right. How could he survive?
They believed he was that started the myth, which becomes even bigger later on, that he's
Unkillable.
impossible to kill. That
Yeah.
yeah, he cannot be killed.
Yep. Meanwhile, this guy, if you really look at history of it, he barely lived. I mean, they literally had to do surgeries on him to like bring his insights back into him. Like this was not what. the media made it seem like.
No.
Until years later, historians realized like how serious it was. Like he didn't just heal himself. Like this guy barely survived surgery, right? But this is also, you're starting to realize that some people start to believe that the woman was really sent by, some people that are known and have a certain status in Russia. Like maybe some people want him out. And that kind of brings us, I think, to his death, which is freaky and interesting in itself. But I think that it's also important to note when we talk about his death, the fact that he was stabbed in the stomach, because that does play a big role in trying to either believe or not believe the way in which he was killed. Pretty
Again,
interesting.
he's not well liked, right? And
Yeah.
there's other assassination attempts on his life, but none were successful until 1916, which basically a group of extremist conservatives, right,
Mhm.
including a prince,
Okay, yeah,
Prince
nephew of the
Felix.
Tsar.
Yeah, he was the husband of the Tsar's niece. Yeah, and members of the Duma, other Grand Dukes, they all kind of come together. Tsar's cousin. They form a conspiracy to basically get rid of him and save the monarchy from further scandal. That's what they want
Mhm.
to do. So the night on December 29th, 1930th, he was invited to the home, and they gave him this massive feast. He had, appetizers, food, dessert,
And they
everything.
brought him in the
And
basement, though. They said
yes, yeah,
particularly, like, "Oh, we got to go in the basement because my wife is having a little get together upstairs," and they had music playing loudly in the one closed
make it
room.
seem like that. Yeah. So
Yeah, as
as
to
soon
why
as
they brought him to like a soundproofed basement.
that was the plan.
Hmm.
And then the legend is, or what comes out and is debated now, is that basically all the food was laced with poison.
Well, that's what the guy said. The guy
Yeah,
whose house it was. This was his
yeah.
account afterwards.
He said all the food was laced with poison, and that Rasputin ate it all, and nothing happened. So
Yep.
he said when they didn't die, they got upset, so they started shooting him.
Yep.
They shot him, I think they were saying like 30 something times in the chest, apparently, right?
Well, eventually,
And
the way that the way that his autopsy went, he got shot twice in the chest.
in the chest. And they think there might have been one shot in the head. That's what
Yeah,
I've
so
heard
that didn't
too.
happen. So this is where it gets interesting,
Yeah,
because they give him all this food, and he supposedly refuses. He doesn't want it. But they're like, no, 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 eat the cake, and he's like, all right, fine. So he eats the cake, which is laced with cyanide, I think. Then they give him wine, which also is laced with cyanide, and then nothing happens. Like you said, these guys are like, what the hell? Like, why is this happening? So they finally get PO'd. They take out a gun. Boom! They shoot him
they start,
twice.
start
Right?
shooting him.
Yeah, they shoot him
And
twice.
supposedly, yeah.
Falls,
And what
and
the
then they
legend is
leave.
that
Did you
the
hear that
legend is
one?
that he's still breathing. Yeah, well, they leave, and supposedly what the legend is that he was still breathing when they came back.
Yes,
Like, oh
because
my God, what's going
no,
on?
the way they left, the reason they left, they actually took his coat and his hat, and they left to be seen somewhere to make it seem like he was around that time. And then they came back to dispose of the body. And as they're about to grab his body, he basically jumps up like, "Arr," he's like alive. They're like, holy crap! And then they beat him, and then supposedly that's when they shoot him the last time, where there's two
And
more
then
shots.
and they tie him up and throw him in a frozen river.
Yes. So one of those shots is a headshot, which is supposedly a kill shot, and then they wrap him up in this like,
Yeah,
and
they
then you're right.
bound him. Like,
Yeah, and then they throw him. Well, oh, the thing is that they bound him really, really tightly, which
yeah,
is
they were
key.
afraid he was going to break out. Yeah,
Yes, because well, even though he was dead, I mean, he got a headshot, and then they actually tie like a rope around this. I think it was a carpet, and then they throw him in a river. Well, his body is found. This is where it gets interesting. An investigation is launched, and that's when police officers come on the scene and they find his body under like a frozen block of ice, right?
yeah.
That's
And the
floating in this
assumption is
river.
that he was that the I mean the legend is that when they pulled him out of the river, he was days later he was still alive.
Yeah, or at least
That's that's
not.
what like they kind of
Yeah,
talk about. They kind of state he wasn't. He was dead.
of
But
course.
the legend is that no, he was still alive even then.
Well, the issue was that he was out of this wrapping, which is what was weird. His one arm was out, like half of his body was out, and if they bound him so tightly inside this carpet,
How did he get out?
how did
Yeah.
he get out? So apparently, supposedly, he got shot in the head, he got shot over his body, he got poisoned, he got beaten, and he still lived. And the official autopsy report that came out in the newspaper said that he died from hyperthermia. I mean, that means he died from like being thrown in a river after getting shot, like in the head. Nuts.
In the head and
Everything
poison.
else.
So,
Oh, it's nuts.
yeah.
Nuts. Like the fact that they would think that he died from hypothermia. But, however, Later on, there was another report that came out, and this is something that is, again, this is the whole disputed part, that basically said that there was no water in Rasputin's lungs, and if there was no water,
And
that
no
means he
water, no
wasn't trying to breathe.
poison, and
Yep,
that
no
he
poison.
was shot. It was he was dead when he was in when they threw him in the water,
Yep,
and it was a shot to the head, like you said before. That basically is what killed
yep.
him.
And also, what's kind of interesting here, a lot of the newspapers at the time, and again, this is kind of to discredit Rasputin, it was the fact that they cut off his penis, and this, you know, organ of his apparently was put in a jar and like sold from person to person, and eventually was given to some collector and displayed in a museum years later. And apparently, it was a very large organ, body part. Um,
Okay, fair enough.
Fair enough. However, it was not his penis because we later find out that that's also one of those myths, due to the fact that he was that did not happen. It was still in his body when it was found. What is kind of interesting in all this, though, is the fact that after the autopsy, they realized that the bullet from the head was not fired from the same gun that fired the other bullets,
Bum
and that
bum
was definitely the
bum.
kill shot, right? Bum bum bum. Now, what makes it even more interesting is that that bullet was fired by a gun that normally would not be seen in Russia at that time that frequently by any means, because it was potentially a British gun or a gun that's used by British agents. Da 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 da.
And again, that's one of those things that just adds to the mythology, to the conspiracy theories about Rasputin.
Yeah, so some writers to this day kind of suggest that British intelligence service basically were involved in Rasputin's assassination. So, according to this theory, British agents were concerned that Rasputin was urging the Tsar to make a separate peace with Germany, which would allow Germany to concentrate its military efforts on the Western Front, which is insane because that's literally what happens
That's what happened. That was what happens anyway, because
because of
yeah,
the Bolsheviks.
this is only a few weeks before the Bolsheviks take power, right? This is
Yep.
only a couple of
Yep.
weeks before, because Alexandria is like, well, she's upset that Rasputin gets killed, but she only resolves her to like protect the monarchy even more. And basically, it doesn't matter anyway because within a few weeks, that's all swept gone. It just collapsed. She's dead in a couple months, really. Her entire family.
Yep. There's another thing that is kind of disputed here is the fact that, and I go back to the whole wound in the being cut up and stuff. He did not supposedly eat much rich, heavy food after that surgery, and he avoided drinking as much, but also he avoided any sweets, which is why people are now saying, well, if that's the case, he would not have eaten a cake that was, laced with any form of poison because he did not eat cake, right? But then other people believe that his teeth were so black because of the fact that he had such a sweet tooth, no pun intended. But then another case goes around and says, well, there really isn't any pictures of him with his mouth open. So how do we know if his teeth were really black? And then you're like, oh, so
Yeah,
there is a
it's
lot of
there's so
question
much
here.
just disputed. He's he's been dead for over 100 years. So
Yeah.
just there, you have a lot of that dispute over time. Things change. Some people say that he was a raging alcoholic. Others say no, he drank, but he was in control. Some say he was a holy man. Others say he used to call prostitutes late at night, just like someone would order a pizza late at night, like
Yeah.
those sorts of things. That he was. It's and you get both sides of the coin. That he was this like evil man, right? Wanted to take over Russia. Another one talks about how he tried to convince the Alexandria to give food to the poor peasants. The, right,
Yep.
that basically so they would she could understand the people's pain. It never happened, but they're saying they found these notes. It's all scribbled on that he's saying you should go do this and things like that of nature. So it's a two-sided coin basically when you're talking about a lot of this stuff with Rasputin.
Yep.
History has really changed the narrative a lot when it comes to him.
And again, there's podcasts upon podcasts on Rasputin out there. There's documentaries about him. I mean, there's people that do like 2, 3 part podcasts on him. Again, that's not really the goal of our podcast. Hopefully, it gets you interested enough to go out there and kind of search some of this stuff. But some fun facts, I guess we could finish up with. First of all, Rasputin was not the first mystic that the Tsar and the Tsarina actually hired.
Yeah.
There was like a French healer before him that would do like seances and claim that he could predict the future and all that stuff. And he was eventually kind of exposed as a charlatan and expelled from Russia. But the royal couple actually did believe that he's the reason that they even had a son. That it was because of this healer, French guy, mystic, that he made sure that she gave birth to a son. So he wasn't the only one. And then some of the other interesting facts from it here, regardless of what the
Well, they
myths
saw
are.
one. I saw this one thing that he used to always do. Apparently, he was known for, and this one isn't really disputed, is that he before dinner parties, a lot of times he would go and he would lick each and every spoon. You
Mm-hmm.
see that?
Mm-hmm.
So he would go and lick all the spoons about to be used to serve other people. And he, again, we said before, he used to always have food in his beard. Basically, he was known for having terrible, terrible personal hygiene in general, and that was like a well-known fact that like Rasputin, he just smelled bad. He was just dirty, and his table manners were just uncivilized, even by today's standards, but definitely by the aristocrats and the higher ups of the Russian society.
Did you hear about the letter? The,
Which
the
letters?
the
I
one
still
in
have a
which
couple
he
different letters.
foretold. So the letter in which Rasputin foretold his death, which was written like a really misspelled words, because as you mentioned earlier, he kind of was not necessarily that
He was
literate.
illiterate, yeah. No, I didn't
Yeah,
hear about that letter. I heard other letters when he's writing to the queen and stuff, but I didn't know.
yeah. So there's a letter that was written in which he foretold his own death, and the authenticity of Rasputin's the letter itself. Right now, as of now, again, this is an ongoing thing. It is believed that he did write this letter, but interestingly enough, it was written to the Tsar, to Tsar Nicholas, in December of 1816. So the year he dies, and he dies. I mean, he dies mere weeks later. But in a letter, he says, "I feel that I shall leave life before January 1st," and he dies on like December 30th. If it was your relations who have wrought my death, then none of your children will remain alive for more than 2 years. And then he gets killed on the morning of December 30th, right, by a group that includes the Tsar's cousin and nephew, or at least nephew-in-law. And sure enough, 2 years later, July 1918, Nicholas, Alexandra, and all four of their children are executed. But then the letter doesn't really appear until 1920s. But enough is
Yeah, so
believed.
yeah, and his secretary was the one that vouched for it being real,
Yep,
like a secretary, but they're not really sure. Other predictions, including he said the world was going to end in August of 2013. That obviously didn't happen.
yep,
Um, but yeah, so he did other predictions, and this one, on the surface looks like it worked. It was true.
yeah. Do you have anything else that's kind of crazy about Rasputin?
There's ton of things with him that he wasn't actually a monk. That was always he's often called the mad monk, right? But he wasn't actually a
Yep,
monk. There was belief that he actually rose from the dead, that he came back. Obviously, that didn't happen, but it's he just has a lot of tied in with those mystic arts.
they also said that was kind of his undoing because the way they kind of baited him to come over to his eventual place of death is they kind of told him that he was going to be a guest of honor at this banquet and there was going to be a lot of women there. And supposedly he just could not resist a good party. So that was the reason he attended. I think that's pretty much all I
Yeah,
got.
that's Rasputin in a nutshell. Obviously, there's a lot more to it. There's books written about him, like you said, Pete, documentaries, probably thousands of podcasts that focus on Rasputin,
Yeah,
and they're all going to go different. Some delve more into the spiritual realm. Some might look more at the murder. Again, we're just giving you kind of a brief overview. We're giving you what a brief little history lesson here on Rasputin's life, his influence in the royal court, why he was there, things of that nature, and just allow you to form your own opinions. And then if you want to go off, like you said before, Peter, and see all other content available about this guy that's out there, go for it.
yep.
Spark your
Again,
interest a little bit.
that's what we do. We're just some history teachers talking. That's all we got.
That's it. That's it.
That's it. That's it. All right, guys. So again, we're trying to kind of diversify from just doing American history, but at the same time, again, this came to us. Well, you suggested this a while back.
We talked about it, yeah, once or twice, and then I think we wind up doing serial killers. That was when we
Instead,
did the
yeah,
one on serial killers, which we can always do more on those because unfortunately there's a lot of them.
yeah. And also, this time around, like we said earlier, this was suggested to us by one of our listeners. So we're like, hey, you know what? We talked about it. It was suggested. Let's do it. So here it is. Again, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in every week and listening to us. We really do appreciate it. Make sure that wherever you do listen to this podcast, you click subscribe. It really helps us out. And I think that's all I got. You got anything else? Oh, and keep them coming, right? Keep somebody's
Keep
suggestions
coming.
coming.
Yeah, we like the suggestions. We like the reviews. Just let us know. And any feedback you have is very helpful.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, guys.
Stay safe, everybody.
I hope everyone enjoyed our podcast, and if you would like to email us, you can do so at historyteacherspodcast@gmail.com.